And I felt like it just turned the light on in my life. Like all of a sudden the lights were on and I could see everything for what it was. And I was like, I'm not unhappy in my marriage because I'm depressed. I'm depressed because I'm unhappy in my marriage.
Welcome to Dating Apps, the podcast where we swap wild dating stories, share laughs, and serve up real talk experiences and advice. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to Dating Apps. I'm your host, Alex Daly, and today we're going to get into a deeply personal topic. We're going to discuss the incredibly tough decision to end a long-term relationship. This is a topic that is very close to my heart. I think it's very important to talk about. And it's a deeply personal decision. That's a really hard one to make. So we're going to talk about it today because I feel like this is an area that doesn't get talked about enough. And it's important to have support around it. Joining me today is my dear friend, Michelle, who has been a great support for me. We've been through a lot together. And one of the biggest things we've supported each other through is this decision to walk away from relationships that no longer served us. For both of us, in that case, it was our marriages. And it wasn't an easy decision for either of us, but we both knew deep down that staying was not the right choice. And it was one of the scariest and hardest decisions I know that I've ever had to make. And Michelle has really supported me through it. She's been through something similar herself. Today, we're going to open up about our stories and how we navigated the fear and most importantly, how we supported each other through this journey. So welcome to the pod, Michelle.
Thank you so much. I think you really summed it up. I feel like we've gotten closer because of this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like not the most fun thing to bond over, but I'm so grateful that we have had each other throughout this process. So yeah, today we're going to talk about some of our fears, our doubts, the wild ride that we've been on, and then, actually the incredible amount of freedom that comes from eventually being able to choose yourself and start over. So if this topic resonates with you at all, stay tuned. We've got a lot to say. I know it's like kind of a heavier topic, but I do want to start on a little bit of a lighter note and also just let our listeners know that both of us we're actually okay. We're in a good spot now. So I don't want it to be all doom and gloom. So we're going to just lighten it up and play a little game of this or that. So are you ready, Michelle?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. The journey is a process, as we all know. So what has helped you through it? Therapy or journaling or both?
I really think both. I've always been a big journaler. Like my iPhone notes app, I'm scared to know how many notes I have. It's just basically where I keep my journals. But I think I need therapy. I could not have one without the other. I think I sort of journal after therapy, before therapy. I can't pick. I think both.
Yeah, I think you do need basically all the tools in your toolkit for this one. And I feel like also another secret option is voice notes.
Yes. Yes.
Which is how you and I primarily communicate. And for me, it really helps just talking things out loud and getting all my thoughts out. And then having you or another supportive friend respond to that is also super helpful.
Yeah, that's especially when your friends are long distance, it makes you feel like I have to just tell somebody this really quick and they don't have to respond right away, but I just need to get it out there. It's so cathartic. I'm so grateful for that feature.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. You definitely need therapy too, because you need that trained person who has also probably heard these same issues 567 times and can advise you on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So during the breakup process, if you could, would you rather move to a new city to start over or stay put and redefine your own space?
I love a fresh start. I miss being in college where my entire life changed every 3 months. I had a new schedule, new classes. I think that I would absolutely, if you can, move for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think you know how I feel about it also.
Yes.
I have really benefited from being able to break out and just fully start over. And I love that the people that I met here met this version of me instead of having to go back into the lore and be like, well, actually this happened. We'll get into all of that soon. But
yes, that's so true.
yeah, it's so nice to just meet people where you are in life and have them meet this fresh version of you. So that was amazing. But I understand that not everyone has that opportunity to move cities, and you have stayed put.
Yeah. I would love like a breakup witness protection program.
Yeah, but redefining your space is great too. I love when people are like, I'm going to rearrange it. This is going to look like a completely different living room.
I'm trying to get there. I want to. I love the idea of it.
Yeah. So it all helps. Okay. So we're talking about ending long-term relationships. Let's say you've done the breakup, you've done the hard stuff. Do you jump back into dating right away, or do you take a break first?
I think take a very long break if you can, but that's when, you will meet someone and it's much easier said than done to be like, I'm taking a break or I want to get out there and date because I feel like I don't know. You should just kind of go with what you feel, but I really believe in a break for me.
Yeah, I think taking a break is smart because it's very easy to, I think, distract yourself with dating and jump into it before you're ready and just use other people as a means of like, well, I'm not going to think about this other thing. So let me dive
I
into something new, which is, it can be fun. It depends on the circumstance. I think you got to use your best judgment, but I think you're right that probably the smartest thing is to take a little break.
Right. And I think it's really just nice to remember what it's like to be alone and all the things that you like to do. Take yourself out on dates, as cheesy as it sounds. It's like making new memories that don't include another person.
Yeah. No, it's a great time to like figure out like, wait, okay, now I have this time back for myself.
Right.
Rather than immediately fill it with another person, let me figure out like what I want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And sometimes it's hard to do because it's easier, honestly, to distract yourself with like other people.
Right. And it's also harder to try new things on your own. You have like a buffer of another person. It's easier, but it feels so much better to do things on your own, like trying new things. You know this
Yeah.
more than anybody.
And I love being on my own schedule, not having to be like, well, okay, we're going to do this thing together, but when can we do it? 6 weeks from now, it's like, no, I
Right.
want to do it today.
You know how many movies I've missed in my lifetime because I waited on other people? Now I just go by myself and see what I want to see.
That's like such a good activity to do when you're by yourself because you're just sitting in a theater anyway. You're not talking. It's just like that's the literal
Exactly.
perfect thing.
Yes. Highly recommend.
Okay. Let's say you are ready to get back into dating. Would you prefer to meet people on dating apps or meet them organically?
For me, definitely organically. I tried dating apps for like a minute, mostly because I was just so curious because I was like, that is so not for me. And I actually didn't know if that was for me or not. So I just gave it a whirl and I was like, I really don't like this. The thing I don't like is that I've never been someone who's like, I'm looking for a relationship. I'm looking for a boyfriend. I'm looking for a guy in my life. And I want somebody to just like fill that slot. I was always just like, oh, I like this person. I click with them. So I think that just like vibes a little bit more for me.
Yeah, no, you cannot tell if you're going to click with someone on the app. It is a bizarre experience because you're just making these snap judgments based on a profile that may or may not have been done well, probably not. And you don't know if you're going to click with them until you meet in person. It's a bizarre experience. I do think it's a good tool to have because it is hard to meet people
Yeah.
organically now.
Right. I never did either. I haven't done either in a really long time, which we'll get to. But
Yeah.
like I never actually matched with someone. I didn't do anything on the apps. I was just like, I'm just gonna look, and that made me like very hetero pessimistic. I think because I was like, men are the worst. Like this is what we're dealing with. So I don't think it was a great representation for me.
But you were a little bit of a lurker. So you were
Yeah,
also
sure.
one of those people that was like contributing to
Yes.
not
What?
communicating well via the apps.
Oh my God, I was. Oh God, I'm part of the problem. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm sure you didn't commit any horrible sins, not any
Yeah.
worse than any of the rest of us have done. So we will forgive and move on. But we will endeavor to meet people out in the wild. I feel like that is the dream. Everyone is dreaming of meeting people in the wild. So maybe it'll happen more now that it's getting warmer out.
Yeah, please.
All right. So let's dive into our discussion today. We've got a lot to say. I think we should give the listeners just a little bit of context about us and our relationship, our friendship. So you and I, we became friends. We've been friends for, I don't know, probably a decade now, which is
Over a
wild.
decade. Yeah, like 12 years it has to be.
We met at the Bar Method. We were working together, fitness studio, shouts out, one of the best workouts ever, but that's a story for another day. So we were just like working together in this environment that was very supportive for women, and so we just like bonded right away. We just like stayed friends throughout the years even though we didn't work together anymore, and what was funny was like we both kind of got married, I think around the same time, like within a year of each other. You were actually in my wedding, and then you were a big part of like helping me get through ending my marriage. So I know you were an inspiration to me. You were a bit of an expander to me. I can talk about it more in a minute, but tell us a little bit about just high level your relationship journey when you started dating, how old you were when you got married, and then, when you felt like things were starting to change.
So we met when I was like in my mid 20s, and I was actually in a relationship and I was like not interested in him. And then he eventually like was very persistent, and everyone around me was like, he's such a good guy, you should date him. And so I kind of was like, okay, he broke me down a little bit, which is like, that's a whole other episode. And yeah, we ended up dating for 2 years before we got engaged. And then we had a very quick engagement because I didn't want like a real wedding. I wanted just like our parents there. And we were married for a few years before we had a baby. We lived together before we got married. We got married in 2014. I was, like I said, I was in my mid 20s. I think I was like 26 or 27 when I got married. And yeah, I got married in 2014. And by 2018 is when I was like, I am really unhappy. And I have been really unhappy. And I did not know what to do with that. And it took years for me to, and the pandemic really confused, I think, probably a lot of us. It made things really confusing and kind of stalled everything. So yeah, we are now, it is 2025. That is how many years later? 7 years later, from when I
Okay.
first, yeah.
So you're saying like basically like 4 years into your marriage is when you first started having thoughts of like, I don't know if this is working for me. Like what were some of the thoughts that were going through your head, and what, if anything, did you do about it then?
So we had like a 1-year-old at that
Mm.
point, had this baby. We had just sold a house and bought like a forever home, quote unquote. And so I had this like marriage and married to this nice guy and this baby and this beautiful house. And I had never been more miserable in my life. I was just like, I am so unhappy. I can't stand. I was coming out of my skin and I
Mm.
did not know what was wrong with me. It felt like, how is it possible that I'm this unhappy? And everyone around me was so proud of me. I come from a very traditional family, and they were like, you've done it all. We are so proud of you. You've hit all of the milestones. And it just felt like it was a nightmare for me. And I remember telling my therapist, and he was like, this reminds me of the Talking Heads song, Once in a Lifetime. That's like, you may end up in a beautiful home with a beautiful wife, and you might ask yourself, how did I get here? And yeah, that's exactly how I felt. It was just a very strange feeling, like everything is wrong, but nothing is wrong.
Yeah. So I feel like I relate to this a lot. It's something similar where it's like, yes, I accomplished all these things. I did this. I have the handsome husband. I got married. We're doing great. From the outside, that's what it looks like. But inside, you're like, wait, what am I even doing here? And I feel like we need to talk about this because you and I have coined this term like the path, TM, like the
Yes.
path trademark, the path that like we didn't even know that we were on, where are on this like relationship escalator. You're following the steps that were set out by society, by our families, like following what our friends have done before us. And it's like almost like you're not making a conscious decision about any of it. You don't even realize that you're on the path until you start to realize, like, wait, this isn't working for me, because you're like, wait, I didn't make any of these decisions.
Right. I think that was the hardest part because I've always been somewhat of a rule follower. And like, I did not realize how much my parents' approval and what they wanted for my life mattered to me. And so the thought of these things not making me happy made me feel so bad. I was like, there's something so wrong with me. I must be really mentally ill or something. Like, I
So yeah,
really
so
thought
you were turning it in on yourself.
that. Mhm.
Your unhappiness, you're like, it must be something wrong with me.
Yeah. I remember just like searching within myself, like, what is wrong with me? Like, what could it be? Like, it must be me because my life on paper is perfect. It can't be my life. It can't be any of the things I'm refusing to look at, you know? And I remember talking to my therapist about it and coming up with a solution at one point, a quote unquote solution of, yeah, I realized when we put the baby down at night, if we just like spend time apart doing two separate things, and that makes us really happy. Like, we're both like in really good moods. We're like refreshed. And my therapist was like, and he was a couples therapist too. And he was like, I've never heard of a bigger red flag than like two people being happier by spending that much time apart. Like, yes, time apart is good, but like, when that's what makes your relationship work is to not be
Mhm.
around each other is a huge red flag. That's when I kind of knew, like, okay, maybe it's us.
Wow. Okay, so how long, like, did this phase go on when you're just sort of, like, unhappy, but you're like, "Well, I guess it's just me." What happened then, and how'd you navigate it?
I basically just I remember having like a nervous breakdown in my kitchen to my sister. Like my sister and her husband were at our house for like a little barbecue. And I just was like really struggling with it. I was feeling so much anxiety. And I just like blurted out, like, I don't know if I want to be married anymore. And she just kind of looked at me and I just kind of looked at her and like we never really talked about it again. And I kind of mentioned it to a couple friends, like I'm feeling really unhappy. I don't really know what to do with this. And they all loved him and but they all supported me. It was just like very confusing for everybody because it kind of came out of nowhere even for me. So I kind of sat with it for at least a year and then the pandemic hit and that then things got really complicated. It just was put right on the back burner and was like, I don't know what to do with that now. That's the last thing I can think about.
But it was also probably, like, in a way, at least it was for me, like, putting more pressure on my relationship because it was like all of a sudden we were with each other all the time when we hadn't been before.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
that was
was
a tough time.
I remember realizing how alone I was. I had been used to being alone because he's like a first responder. I will not say which kind, but you can imagine he had a weird schedule and I was used to like him working nights and just not being around. I was used to like having my own life, my own time to myself. But when the pandemic hit, it was like I was seeing all these people around me who were also alone and were also like used to not doing much. And I was a new mom, so there wasn't much excitement in my life. And all of these people around me were living the same reality, but they like had a partner in it if they were married or like in a relationship. And I didn't have that. Like all I asked for was like, can we do like a date night in? Or like, do you want to do a puzzle? And he just had no interest in doing anything with me. And that was like, yeah, like this is really bad. This is really not good. Not to like compare yourself to other people, but you know when you want something and your relationship is really lacking it.
Yeah, that's an experience I relate to also. Feeling like I was unhappy and then being like, well, let me try this. Let me do a date night. Let me try to rope my partner into this. And then being met with kind of like this resistance. And like my experience was I tried a few more times, but when you're met with resistance and no, and like maybe, but not right now, and then the time never comes, well, I guess I'm just gonna move on my own, which, I mean, that was, like, just the decision that I came to naturally. I don't think it was a great one because I should have communicated more of, like, my needs and, like, what I was thinking, but instead I was just like, "Well, it's gonna be easier for me to start doing things on my own rather than try to rope in this person who really doesn't want to do it." But then by me becoming more independent within my relationship, it started to further erode our
Yes.
relationship.
Oh my God, I so get that. But you know, it's not that you weren't communicating your needs. It's really unfortunate that I think in like heterosexual relationships, it's like a woman will typically express like, hey, this would make me happy. This would make me happy. And men don't realize that like not doing those things is going to make her unhappy. Like we shouldn't have to explicitly state like not doing this is going to erode our relationship. Like they just sometimes don't pick up on that. And I completely understand. We're just like, okay, this isn't working for me. So, and I think we're very similar in just being independent people. Just I'm going to do things that make me happy. And you think that's the solution, but it actually can drive a wedge between you two. And I think we both kind of hit that point.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say I was at the time pretty bad at communicating. So, like, don't give me too much credit. I was someone who would rather just keep things to myself because it
Me
was
too.
too scary to share it or whatever. Like, didn't want to rock the boat or didn't want to be met with like another no or something like that. But yeah, I think like the Gottmans, like John and Julie Gottman, who have like done all this relationship research, have done this study where the more times a couple can like turn towards each other when you do have those little like bids for attention or interest or whatever, the more likely to the relationship is going to work. But every time one person has like a little bid for attention and the partner turns away, the more often that happens and the more likely that you are going to like grow apart. And I feel like that's definitely what happened for me and my ex. Was like we were not turning towards each other.
Yeah, it's really sad that it's that simple, you know? I mean, I always wonder like if he did all the right things, would I still be in this situation? And I kind of think maybe we also grew apart. I think you and I have talked about this too. Like we're just such different people when we were
Yeah.
in our 20s. And I don't know if there's anything that could have saved it, maybe. But I think we just grew, we were becoming different people, and those two people had nothing to do with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's real when you do meet someone when you're younger and you're figuring your stuff out. So I think growing apart is just like a natural part of relationships. Sometimes that's the reality of it. I think another thing that you and I had in common is just the fact that we were married to people who were like decent human beings,
Mm.
and there really wasn't this humongous like problem or blow up or toxic abuse or anything like that. So I feel like the hard thing for both of us was feeling like we needed more of a reason to end our relationship. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know we've gone on about it like at length with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I used to lay in bed at night and plead with the universe for him to do something bad. And that's a really sad. It was really sad in the moment and really sad to think about that. I used to be like, I just hope he cheats on me. I hope he does something awful. I hope he ends this so that I'm not the bad guy. And so that anybody could just understand why I want to leave him. Because the idea of like, I'm unhappy, just that seemed like laughable that anybody would accept that. I don't know who I needed to accept it, but it just seemed like that was not enough. That like, this was a good man. And I was going by everything on paper. Like, this is a good guy. He didn't do anything bad. You know, nothing's really wrong. We just have to work harder. And it was just like, that wasn't enough for me. That wasn't going to make me happy. But my happiness did not feel like it was enough of a reason.
Yeah. And that's so real because I feel like the way that divorce or breakups are portrayed in like popular media is that there has to be this horrible blow up point and then you just can't go back. But like what happens if you are with someone who is like a decent human being, but your partnership is just not working? Like how like
Right.
that was one of the hardest parts for me. Like how did you move through that and then ultimately decide that like it was okay and you didn't need more of a reason to break up?
I think it's pretty crazy because I actually remember the moment I had started an antidepressant because I had postpartum depression. And I have a lot of thoughts, and I know a lot of like feminist thinkers are realizing the same thing that like a lot of postpartum depression is not really hormones and brain chemicals. It's your partner is not supportive and you're not being supported and helped through this huge life change. And so I went on an antidepressant and I had been on one before and like it was okay. But this one, I really felt a difference. And I know not everybody is for them, but for me, it just like I felt like myself again in a way that like I never knew that I could feel this way. And I felt like it just turned the light on in my life. Like all of a sudden the lights were on and I could see everything for what it was. And I was like, I'm not unhappy in my marriage because I'm depressed. I'm depressed because I'm unhappy in my marriage. It just really just, I just remember having this moment of realizing it and be like, oh my God, what do I do with this? But I just remember realizing it so strongly.
Yeah. So that's a big realization to come to. I'm just curious how you actually were able to navigate through the fear then of being like, okay, now I know this thing and I have to do something about it. For me, that was the second biggest hurdle to get over was like, okay, I've realized that being unhappy is enough of a reason to end this relationship. But now I have to do this really hard thing to this person who is a decent human being who I care about, who I've lived with for many years. Like, how the fuck do I do that?
Yeah.
Like, and I just like kind of froze for a while. And this is where honestly you jumped in to help me get moving on this again. But like, how did you get through that time?
It was brutal because I didn't know who to talk to about it. I spoke to my therapist about it. I told a couple friends and it just, I felt so guilty, especially with friends who were single. And it's like, you have a really good guy. Are you sure? Like, I can understand their perspective, but it was like, yeah, I'm sure. I've thought about this for years, you know, and a lot of the cultural conditioning, you know, for all of us of just like, yeah, but that's just marriage. And that's just, yeah, like you have young kids. That's just like how it is. So it was really scary to find it, to feel like it was safe to talk to anybody about it. So I kept it in for a really long time. I was even scared to tell you, you know, and you had
Yeah.
the best response. You immediately called me. Unfortunately, you were like, well, fortunately, you're like, me too. You know, like I'm thinking the
No.
same thing. And that was probably the first time I actually felt really like seen and just like, oh my God, somebody else really gets it. They're not just like trying to understand, they actually do understand. So it was a very slow process for me to actually take those steps. I told my parents probably after telling like my therapist and him that I needed to do this. And my parents had a horrible reaction. And so that really colored how I saw telling anybody else too. It was just like, okay, everyone is going to be really upset with me. But yeah, I have been, this has been in the works for like 3 years now. And I just told my extended family right before
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
that is
So
wild.
yeah, so it's like I'm still in the process of telling people, and it's still really hard.
Yeah, no, and I so appreciate that you were able to tell me because that then helped me because I felt like I wasn't alone all of a sudden. I literally called you and like almost immediately started crying, I think, because I was like, I feel the exact same. And because you were like, we ended things. We're both doing okay. He's still a good person. We're trying to navigate it, la la la. And I was like, wait, this is exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
So it was very, very scary. And I think that is a very scary aspect when you're in these like either marriages or long term relationships where your life is very enmeshed and you've introduced this person to your family or friends, like extended group. Everybody knows that. And everybody has this very specific vision of your relationship, which is from the outside and not accurate at all. So then it feels very scary to tell these people, like, actually, this relationship is ending. It's maybe not what you thought it was. Even though we're both good people, nothing really happened, but this is no longer working. I had a ton of fear of judgment from my friends and family, and I feel like you did as well. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? If you got any negative reactions, like what did you do about it?
I have to point out that I think it's really funny, like genuinely funny, that so many people, like their first response after they say, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, no, it's fine. They're like, can I ask what happened? It like a lot of women ask that. And I feel like it's a way to be like, am I going through this too? And
Yeah.
it's kind of funny that they feel like comfortable doing that. I'm glad that they do because I think that we should talk about these things more openly because I think when you're dating, you're talking to your friends about your relationships and your dating problems. When you get into a marriage, it's kind of like you don't talk about those things. It feels weirder to do that. So yeah, so it felt really vulnerable and private to be like, here are my problems. I was afraid to put it out there and I did not know what anybody thought of me or my marriage. And I hadn't posted anything about him or pictures of us in years. And I really hope that people were like me, like speculating, like, ooh, are they breaking up? But no one, well, I can't believe that no one so far that I've spoken to has been like, I knew something was off. Like it was a shock to everybody that I've told. And yeah, just navigating the bad reactions. I mean, like I said, I have a very traditional family. And, I heard from a lot of people, like, did you try therapy first? As if my feelings were not valid or like you have to work at it if you're not happy. And we did go through couples therapy before all of this even happened, before we got married, which I highly recommend. But there was no couples therapying our way out of this.
Mhm.
It was like we fell out of love and grew apart and just breaking that down to people, depending on how old they were too. Like a lot of people are like the older people in my life are like, that's just life. That's just marriage. And then there were some women who were older were like, yeah, I get this. Like, I remember that when I was like your age. And like, I'm really proud of you for like going for it, and not living a life that you're unhappy with. I mean, a lot of women our age were very supportive. I've mostly gotten supportive responses from, but I have heard from a lot of women that they feel similarly. And
Yeah.
I used to feel really guilty. I'm like, oh my God, is divorce contagious? Am I like spreading this? Like, I don't want to influence people to get divorced. And that actually stopped me from telling people. So I was like, what if I'm going to find out like everybody I know is in an unhappy marriage? It's like, I just felt this weird responsibility. My therapist was like, you got to let that go.
You do have to let that go. I do think a lot of people are in unhappy marriages. I think that is correct. And I think that's where a lot of the negative reactions tend to come from is other people's fears of being like, well, if they can't make it work, can I make it work? Like, is this even possible? I literally had one friend of mine say to me, like, what if that happens to me? And then there's the people who like are sort of in denial about being in unhappy relationships. So then those are the people that are like almost mad at you
Yeah,
for making this decision that they
totally.
probably wish that they could. So it's like it's a lot when you're managing people's reactions, but I feel like I just kind of had to let that all go and just like let them have their reactions whatever it is, and that's really more about them than it is about me.
Totally. And I think it really is a case for it's never as bad as you fear it's going to be. I mean, other than my parents, most people were like really supportive. Like I thought I knew some people who were like very traditional in their like family values. And I was like, they are going to like try to lecture me. And it was like, okay, even if they do, so what? It's like a lot of like, so what? I let them respond. And that, like you said, that's a reflection of them. Yeah. So I did have one guy friend that this just like spoke volumes of him, where he was really delicately like, how can I avoid this? Like, how can I, like, is there anything that you think that you look for advice of like, how can I make sure this doesn't happen to my wife? I never want her to feel that way. And I thought that was like brilliant. I thought that was so great that he's like thinking of that, because I think that's kind of how it happened. Like, my husband was not thinking of me ever and my happiness.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And like we are just like all navigating this sort of like in the dark. And it does feel really scary to tell other people, to manage other people's reactions when you are already trying to navigate your way through this like very scary thing. And like I also was met with some resistance from my family. Not that they weren't supportive of me. I knew that they like ultimately wanted the best for me. But when you've been with someone for a while and they almost like become part of your family, it's like, well, like, are you sure? Like, well, what is he going to do? Like, should we still invite him to events? I still get texts from some of my family being like, should we invite him? And I'm just like, yeah, if you want to, yeah. Like, you don't have to like completely cut someone out of your life, especially when it's a situation like you and I had where we didn't have a huge, horrible ending. It's like, yeah, we can try to maintain some sort of relationship. But that, again, that's like, you have to be a little bit more open to gray areas. You have to be okay with like a little bit of non-traditional stuff in your life where it's like, yeah, I can have my ex at this event and we can be civil and we can even be friendly, and but not everybody feels that way. And I get that. So it's just like learning how to navigate all this and navigate it with your friends and family's input. But you ultimately have to pick what you feel is best for you and yourself and your relationship and your life, and not let that like hold you back from moving forward.
Absolutely. It's like the cliche of someone's always going to have a problem or an opinion with what you're doing. So you might as well do what you want and just be happy. It really is that simple.
Yeah. It's so true. And I don't know how you feel, but like to me it was very hard to get over. I wasn't supposed to get divorced, like I'm like eldest daughter, honor roll, like doing what I was supposed to do all the time, and this was off the script. So I think that's such like a hurdle.
That was really hard for me because I'd always done everything I was supposed to do, everything my parents wanted. I didn't question any of it. And I did it and like, I didn't struggle through it. It was like, I found this guy, it worked out. It just felt like the natural progression of things. And yeah, that was really, really hard to be like, this was not in the plans. But, I also used that as my defense to my family more than anyone. Like, I didn't go into this thinking I would be divorced.
Hmm.
I
Of
didn't get
course.
married thinking I would be divorced. So like, I'm just as surprised as you are.
Yeah, that's so real. I think nobody goes into a marriage thinking that they're going to get divorced, but life happens and we have to have a little bit of flexibility, growth mindset. I think that's another one. Like, honestly, I felt like I have a big growth mindset and I'm always kind of looking for ways to better myself, thinking about what is coming next. Sometimes to a fault, I will say, like, sometimes it is okay to like not constantly be moving forward. But if you have a growth mindset and your partner doesn't, it's going to be really hard to like stay aligned throughout all the years. But anyway, coming back to how we have supported each other throughout this journey, like how important of a part do you think it is to have people around you who are supporting you, maybe listening to you, even if they don't fully understand your situation? What role do you think other people and outside support plays in getting through this decision and like life transition?
I think I've always been someone who felt weird about sharing my life. Like, if it was just like a normal text conversation, to be like, anyway, so what's going on with you? Like, I just didn't really like to talk about myself too much. And so it just always felt weird to have something so big going on, especially if my friends couldn't really relate. But I have learned to get over that, maybe a little too much, because I leave like personal podcasts of voice notes to you guys now. But I really, really, as cheesy as this may sound, I really started to understand the whole like, your friends are your chosen family, because I couldn't help who my family was and how traditional they were. And that they couldn't understand it. But my friends, they knew me and they really, really knew me. And I realized like, wow, my family, my parents don't really know who I am as much as my friends really get me. They really know me. They really get me. I'm fully myself in front of them and with them. And I don't know. I always cared about my friends, but this just really elevated my friendships I just prioritize them so much. And being so vulnerable with friends was new to me. My friends knew like surface level. They knew like some of my issues going on, but I kept it. So anyway, I don't want to talk more about this. I will fight against that. Just getting vulnerable, you just get so much closer to people. It's just a nice little cycle
Yeah.
that I
I
never really appreciated. Yeah.
I feel like this has definitely brought us closer to each other. And I feel like you and I have gotten to a point where it's like, no, like, don't say anyway what's going on with you. Like, I want to know. Like, tell me all the details. Like, let's get into it. But it took us a while to get there too, because it does feel like, oh, I don't want to like burden you with these problems. It's like, no, tell me what's going on. Like, let's walk through it together.
Yes, absolutely. And I think just when you try like one thing, you dip your toe into being like, I'm going to be really honest about this thing that's almost like shameful or embarrassing. It's like, no, I get you. Keep going. Like, I'm not judging you. I want to hear more about this. I think you and I
Yeah.
have had such a good relationship with each other with that. Just like, no, this is a judgment free zone for real. Just put it all out there.
Yeah. And I think it's like you have to put stuff out there. It makes it less scary and it makes it less shameful.
Totally.
And to have someone relate to your experience, you're like, oh, I'm not in this alone. I feel like you and I both realize, oh, we're actually not special at all. We are like the bajillionth people to have gone through this, and we're not special in like a good way. It's like, oh, thank God someone else knows what I'm feeling.
Yes. Whenever so I have depression, as I mentioned, and whenever I have like a very like textbook, like depression thought or moment, I started saying to myself, like to my brain, like real original, like real original. I tell my sister that, who's a therapist, she like loves that I'm like, yeah, like I'm not phased by like, I'm not special. Like this is textbook, you know? So I love to not feel special in situations like this.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important to like talk to your friends, because you don't know, maybe they are feeling similarly, which is exactly what happened for you and I. And then we've been able to like be there and support each other throughout this whole life transition. But we wouldn't have known that if you hadn't opened up to me and shared what you were going through, what you were feeling. And I think it's so important to like have these friendships to guide you through.
It's been like everything to me. And I feel like I have gotten a little distant from my family because I feel like I can't be honest with them. So I've gotten closer to my friends. So I don't feel like I have this void. I can't imagine how alone I would feel, because I do still struggle with like feeling alone in this, because it is very isolating. Even when you have support, only you really know it's like you and the person you're splitting up from are the only people who really understand what it's like to be in that relationship. So it's isolating to begin with. So it's just very necessary to have close friends and people you can trust.
Yeah. And you definitely can't get support from that person that you're
No,
breaking up with. So you have to go outside of that in order to like have support for the breakup. I think it's so important. It would have taken me so much longer and would have been so much more of a struggle if I didn't have your support and the support of my other friends who were either going through something similar or were just like a sympathetic ear and would just be an outside voice, an outside listener. Like it's so, so helpful. And it's also something I realized everything is 2020 in hindsight, but I'm just like, wow, like I wish I had maintained some of my friendships more at a deeper level when I was in my marriage, because it was kind of just like we defaulted to each other for our social lives and our friendship and stuff. And something I want going forward is like maintaining these friendships. And even when you do get into a new relationship, I think it's so important to maintain your friendships, have them be an important part of your life, because relationships come and go and you want your friends there, you want them to have your back, and you want to like maintain that support and communication and just relationship with your friends throughout.
absolutely. That is something I think about all the time. Like, he was a first responder, had this weird schedule. When we first moved in together, I felt like I didn't know how to navigate this. Like, okay, I guess I'm like, this is my partner. I'm in a serious relationship now. I'm supposed to like yield to them and their schedule, and I should prioritize them. It's like the messaging that we receive, but it's really wrong. It's like the whole like decentering men thing. It doesn't have to be, that's not an aggressive term. It's really just like prioritize all of your relationships in your life. Keep your friendships up there. So I
Yeah,
totally agree with you.
they're so important. They're so important. And I'm like so grateful for our friendship and how we've supported each other. And we're continuing to support each other, because it's not like you just make the decision to end your relationship and like you're done with it, you process it, like you're processing it forever. Like, as we all know, healing is not linear. So I love that we're like continuing to support each other on this.
Me too.
Yeah. So I would love to know, once the dust settled, once you've gotten over these like big hurdles, you've told people, you've ended your relationship, like what are some surprising things that you've learned? Have you like found any joy? Have you found freedom? What's the challenge? Like, how did you come out of this?
So I think I again have a weird case, like because he just moved out, just like we've been separated for 3 years, just about 3 years, and he just moved out a month ago. So I'm just it happened so slowly. First, it was just like, yeah, I feel free. I feel I like I'm living my truth. It was like in phases. Like, okay, I'm living my truth. I'm slowly telling people, and now I feel like I'm just suddenly very suddenly like experiencing like what it really feels like to be separated from this person and to be on my own. And it is just wild. It's wild how many things I'm like, oh, I'm really okay on my own. Like I do not need this person. I can shovel snow, I could take out the garbage, I can do all these things that he was claiming to be such a big part of the things he did around here. And I found that like I am such a better mom, even though I have 2 kids. I don't know if I mentioned that. And I am able to just be so much more present and calm. I don't really know what it is yet. I can't really put my finger on it, where it's just like, I know that no one's going to disrupt my peace, I guess. He's not going to come home from work and change the whole vibe of the home. He's not going to fail to do something that was his responsibility. It's just like all on me in the best way, where because I trust myself, I know that I've got it. And there's just something about having your own back that you know that no one's going to disappoint you. And that can get toxic, yes. But it's just knowing that I can do it and that I'm doing a better job. Like I have more of a handle on my life than I think I've ever had. I think you and I have talked about this, like when you go through periods of like not having a job and you kind of feel like your time is just like your time management is bad. But when you have a job, you have less time, but you're managing it better. So it feels like you have more time. It's like now that everything is my responsibility, I have a good flow. So that was really surprising. So I was really scared. Like, how am I going to do all this by myself?
Yeah. No, and I think you made a really good point about like your kids and how you're able to actually be a better parent, because I feel like so many people, especially like our parents' generation, I think hopefully maybe people are doing it less, but I feel like people do still feel the pressure to be like staying in a relationship for the kids. But what kind of an example are you setting if you are making yourself unhappy? Like kids are, first of all, going to be able to tell that you're unhappy. And now that you are making yourself a priority and you're making yourself happy, you're able to be a better parent. So isn't that actually the better decision for your children?
Absolutely. I mean, I am so much happier. My nervous system is regulated. I'm able to have more patience with my kids. I have more of a bandwidth. Just in general, I feel like I'm able to. I mean, I also feel like it's like the ultimate life hack for parents, where you kind of get like half your time back suddenly, depending on how you do your custody. But I just feel like my life has a better balance. It feels more fair. And I feel like I'm not burnt out. I feel like I finally have the balance that I always wanted in my marriage and in like my co-parenting. And I think my kids are learning that they, like you said, they pick up on everything. They were so aware that we were unhappy. Even when we weren't fighting, they knew. Yeah, I think I'm definitely setting a better example of like, you can do things, you can do what you want. Your life can look however you want it to look. All families are different. I heard a stat from a podcast, actually. I think it was like a podcast series called the 82%. It's like 82% of households, maybe in America or the world, I don't know, are not the nuclear family, not two parents and children. It's 82% don't follow
Wow.
that. And it's like, we don't see that. I don't see that. But that is like, I guess, based on census data. It was like a real legit. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was so I'm like, okay, like this is my chance to teach my kids, like all families look different. There's so many things that have come my way that I can teach my kids that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, we are stepping outside of the norm. We have stepped off the path. We are off script. It does feel, of course, a little bit scarier to be off script, but I think similar to you, I have also found freedom in it. I've also found a lot of happiness and joy. And so I feel like, you can make things work when it looks a little less traditional, and like it's on the other side of doing that scary thing.
Absolutely. It's so worth it. Like anything that you're afraid of is so much smaller than the joy that you will feel on the other side of it.
Yeah, you just got to get over that hurdle. All right, are there any other takeaways that you're dying to share?
Something that I think is interesting is like I never know. I'm dying to tell more people, but I never know how. And this is something that's like one of those, like, they don't tell you these things about divorce. And I just wish that there was a way that like I could just like, hey, how are you to my neighbors? Like, hey, I just got divorced, just so you know, you know? So that's like something that's like kind of a funny, hard thing that I'm working through. Right now, like, I have this big piece of news to share. It's like I'm trying to find the funny in it, you know?
Yeah, I know. If only we could all just be out in the open, upfront about everything. I wonder how different this world would be.
Yeah, I like envy celebrities that can put out a statement, you know?
Hmm. Yes, like please respect our privacy at this time.
Yeah.
We are consciously uncoupling, which I
Like
used to think was so dumb, but I'm like, no, Gwyneth was onto something. Consciously uncouple. Let's do it intentionally.
absolutely. And I feel like it's just interesting that I used to be like, I have to hide this from everybody. Now I'm like, how can I find a creative way to tell these people?
Well, send them
Here
this
it is.
podcast. Exactly. Perfect. So we're gonna get the word out. We're gonna get the pod out. So
Yeah,
I so
excited.
appreciate you sharing some of your story with us, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the platform to do so.
Yeah, I think this was great. I feel like we could talk about this topic all day, but maybe we'll have to have you on for a part two.
I would absolutely come on. I'll talk about anything with you.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for listening. If you are feeling stuck in a relationship that no longer brings you joy, just know that you're not alone. We've been through it. Other people are going through it, and you're not alone in this. So reach out to your support group. It's never too late to choose yourself, and it's never too late to figure your stuff out and start over. And both of us are here to tell you that and support you in this journey.
Absolutely.
If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who might need a little reminder that happiness is just around the corner, it's within reach, and we're all going to support each other through it. So I appreciate you all, friends. Until next time, we will talk to you later.